deceit, and we will see later that this deceit is the most difficult problem to unearth. So we will continue. Calm comes in so many different alluring and attractive forms. Woman, children, home, husband, paraphernalia, all kind of things, and they are very deceiving. All of these things seems to be so very attractive. But in the fifth canto, Shukadev Goswami gives the analogy that all the family members are like thieves. Even though we might think, quote, oh, this is my dear husband, unquote, or this is my dear wife and children. Actually, they are all thieves, stealing our hard-earned treasure, not money, but actually one's hope for advancement in spiritual life. So difficult to take this sentence. That's why all the family members should be devotees. This is the meaning of bhaka, duplicity, where friend is really an enemy. How we will be saved? What should we do? First, we have to be convinced that we are in a dangerous situation. Sometimes we think, quote, it's all right, I will handle it myself. It's not such a big thing to get away with it. I may learn more later in Krishna consciousness, unquote. So if we are not aware of the danger, we don't think it is such a bad thing. If we recognize the dangers, then automatically we want to be saved. Then, Phut Karan, we scream out, Baka Bhed Vartam Gane, to the unalloyed devotees of the Lord. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that they are like Krishna's police force. And just as a police force guards a certain place, devotees are the guardian of our path of devotion. That is their service. That is the responsibility of a Vaishnava, to guard the path of devotion. We saw that nature often with Srila Prabhupada. He was like policeman. As soon as he saw some deviation in devotees in his society, that they had gone toward Mayavad or Sahajaism, or most especially philosophical deviation, Prabhupada would immediately be like a policeman, immediately arresting the person, correcting the situation, eradicating and purifying any anomaly he come across. So devotees who are Baka Bhed Vartamappa Gane, which indicate that they are free from deceit, can assist us. If they themselves are deceitful, then how can they assist somebody? They protect the path of bhakti from deceit. Otherwise, deceit becomes a very great obstacle. And we will read later on why it is so in verse number 6. The nature of deceit is not only that one tries to deceive others, but one also deceives oneself. Therefore, one loses sight of which path is the real path. We need a real association. By association, one becomes free from this deceitful mentality. This is the method of purification. I think there is a long paragraph, so we will read tomorrow, and then we will start also Bhakti Vigyan Goswami Maharaj commentary on verse number 5. So we are reading from Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita. We are reading from volume number 3. The chapter title is Swami Invites the Hippies. I'll read one paragraph as weekend has passed by and our memory is very flickering. Almost everyone who came wore bright or unusual costumes, tribal robes, Mexican ponchos, Indian kurtas, God's eyes, feathers, and beads. Some hippies brought their own flutes, lutes, gourds, drums, rattles, horns, and guitars. The Hells Angels, dirty hair, wearing jeans, boots, and denim jacket, and accompanied by their women, made their entrance, carrying chains, smoking cigarettes, and displaying their regalia of German helmets, emblems, and so on. Everything but their motorcycles, which they had parked outside. So that's where we left on Friday, so we continue. The devotees began a warm-up kirtan on stage, dancing the way Swamiji had shown them. Incense poured from the stage and from the corner of the large ballroom. And although most in the audience were high on drugs, the atmosphere was calm. They had come seeing a spiritual experience. As the chanting began very melodiously, some of the musicians took part by playing their instruments. The light show began. Strobe lights flashed. Color balls bounced back and forth to the beat of the music. Large blobs of pulsing color splurred across the floor, walls, and ceiling. A little after 8 o'clock, Moby Grape took the stage with heavy electric guitars, electric bass, and 2 drummers. They launched into their first number. The large speakers shocked the ballroom with their vibrations, and a roar of approval rose from the audience. Around 9:30, Prabhupada left his Frederick Street apartment and got into the back seat of Harvey's Cadillac. He was dressed in his usual saffron robes, and around his neck he wore a garland of gardenias whose sweet aroma filled the car. You know, yesterday we clipped so many gardenias from our garden, very fragrant flowers. It started blooming now. Very good. On the way to the Avalon, he talked about the need to open more centers. Prabhupada is always wants to have more centers. At 10 o'clock, Prabhupada walked up the stairs of the Avalon, followed by Kirtananda and Ranchor. As he entered the ballroom, devotees blew conch shells. Someone began a drum call, and the crowd parted down the center, all the way from the entrance to the stage, opening a path for him to walk. With his head held high, Prabhupada seems to float by as he walked through the strange milieu, making his way across the ballroom floor to the stage. Suddenly the light show changed. Picture of Krishna and his pastime flashed onto the wall. Krishna and Arjuna riding together on Arjuna's chariot. Krishna eating butter. Krishna subduing the whirlwind demon. Krishna playing the flute. As Prabhupada walked through the crowd, everyone stood, applauding and cheering. He climbed the stairs and seated himself softly on a waiting cushion. The crowd quieted. Looking over at Allen Ginsberg, Prabhupada said, quote, "You can speak something about the mantra," unquote. Allen began to tell of his understanding and experience with the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. He told how Swamiji had opened a storefront on 2nd Avenue and had chanted Hare Krishna in Tompkins Square Park. And he invited everyone to the Frederick Street Temple. Quote, "I especially recommend the early morning kirtans," unquote, he said, "for those who, coming down from LSD, want to stabilize their consciousness on re-entry," unquote. Prabhupada spoke, giving a brief history of the mantra. Then he looked over at Allen again. Quote, "You may chant," unquote. So Allen began playing his harmonium and chanting into the microphone, singing the tune he had bought from India. Gradually, more and more people in the audience caught on and began chanting. As the kirtan continued and the audience got increasingly enthusiastic, musicians from the various bands came on stage to join in. Ranchur, a fair drummer, began playing Molly Grape's drums. Some of the bass and other guitar players joined in as the devotees and a large group of hippies mounted the stage. The multicolor oil slick pulsed and the balls bounced back and forth to beat of the mantra, now projected onto the wall. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. As the chanting spread throughout the hall, some of the hippies got to their feet, held hands, and danced. Allen Ginsberg is putting in his own word as follows. We sang Hare Krishna all evening. It was absolutely great, an open thing. It was the height of the height Asbury spiritual enthusiasm. It was the first time that there had been a music scene in San Francisco where everybody could be part of it and participate. Everybody could sing and dance rather than listen to other people sing and dance. Janki is explaining in her words, people didn't know what they were chanting for, but to see that many people chanting, even though most of them were intoxicated, made Swamiji very happy. He loved to see the people chanting. Hayagriva is explaining in his words as follows. Standing in front of the bands, I could hardly hear, but above all, I could make out the chanting of Hare Krishna, building steadily. On the wall behind, a slide projected a huge picture of Krishna in a golden helmet with a peacock feather and a flute in his hand. Then Srila Prabhupada stood up, lifted his arms and began to dance. He gestured for everyone to join him, and those who were still seated stood up and began dancing and chanting and swaying back and forth, following Prabhupada's gentle dance. Roger Schigel explained in his word as follows. The ballroom appeared as if it was a human field of wheat blowing in the wind. It produced a calm feeling in contrast to the Avalon ballroom atmosphere of gyrating energies. The chanting of Hare Krishna continued for over an hour, and finally, everyone was jumping and yelling, even crying and shouting. Someone placed a microphone before Srila Prabhupada, and his voice resounded strongly over the powerful sound system. The tempo quickened. Srila Prabhupada was perspiring profusely. Kirtananda insisted that the kirtan stop. Swamiji was too old for this, he said. It might be harmful. But the chanting continued, faster and faster, until the words of the mantra finally became indistinguishable amidst the amplified music and the chorus of thousands of voices. Then suddenly it ended, and all that could be heard was the loud hum of the amplifier and Srila Prabhupada's voice ringing out, offering obeisances to his spiritual master. Quote, Om Vishnupad Paramahans Parigavacharya Astotara Sasi Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. Srila Prabhupada made his way upstage through the heavy smoke and crowds and down the front stair with Kirtananda and Ranchor close behind him. Alan announced the next rock group. As Swamiji left the ballroom and the appreciative crowd behind, he commented, quote, this is no place for brahmachari, unquote. The next morning, the temple was crowded with young people who had seen Swamiji at the Avalon. Most of them had stayed up all night. Srila Prabhupada, having followed his usual morning schedule, came down at 7, hailed Kirtan, and delivered the morning lecture. Later that morning, while riding to the beach with Kirtananda and Hayagriva, Swamiji asked how many people had attended last night Kirtan. When they told him, he asked how many money they have made. And they said they weren't sure, but it was approximately $1,500. Half audibly, he chanted in the back seat of the car, looking out the window as quiet and unassuming as a child, with no indication that the night before he had been cheered and applauded by thousands of hippies who had stood back and made a grand aisle for him to walk in trump across the straw-lit floor amid the thunder of the electric basses and pounding drums of the Avalon ballroom. For all the funfare of the night before, he remained untouched, the same as ever in personal demeanor. He was aloof, innocent, and humble, while at the same time appearing very grave and ancient. As Kirtananda and Hayagriva were aware, Swamiji was not of this world. They knew that he, unlike them, was always thinking of Krishna. They walked with him along the broad walk near the ocean with its cool breeze and cresting waves. Kirtananda spread the chadar over Prabhupada's shoulders. Quote, in Bengali, there is one nice verse, unquote, Prabhupada remarked, breaking his silence. Quote, I remember, oh, what is that voice across sea calling, come here, unquote. Speaking little, he walked the broad walk with his two friends, frequently looking out at the sea and sky. As he walked, he softly sang a mantra that Kirtananda and Hayagriva had never heard before. Govinda Jaya Jaya, Gopala Jaya Jaya, Radha Ramana Hari, Govinda Jaya Jaya. He sang slowly in a deep voice as they walked along the broad walk. He looked out at the Pacific Ocean, but because it is great, it is tranquil, unquote. Quote again, the ocean seems to be eternal, unquote, Hayagriva Vanchu. Quote, no, unquote, Prabhupada replied, nothing in the material world is eternal. In New York, since there were so few women present at the temple, people had inquired whether it were possible for a woman to join the Krishna conscious movement. But in San Francisco, that question never arose. Most of the men who came to learn from Swamiji came with their girlfriends. To Prabhupada, these boys and girls, eager for chanting and hearing about Krishna, were like sparks of faith to be fanned into steady, blazing fire of devotional life. There was no question of his asking the newcomers to give up their girlfriends or boyfriends, and yet he uncompromisingly preached no illicit sex. The dilemma, however, seemed to have an obvious solution. Many the couples in Krishna consciousness. Because traditionally a sannyasi would never arrange or perform marriages by Indian standard, someone might criticize Prabhupada for allowing any mingling of the sexes. But Prabhupada gave priority to spreading Krishna consciousness. What Indian, however critical, had ever tried to transplant the essence of India's spiritual culture into the Western culture? Prabhupada saw that to change the American social system and completely separate the man from the woman would not be possible. But to compromise his standard of no illicit sex was also not possible. Therefore, Krishna conscious married life, the Grihastha ashram, would be the best arrangement for many of his new aspiring disciples. In Krishna consciousness, husband and wife could live together and help one another in spiritual progress. It was an authorized arrangement for allowing a man and woman to associate. If as spiritual master, he found it necessary to perform marriages himself, he would do it. But first, these young couples would have to become attracted to Krishna consciousness. Joan Campalena had grown up in a wealthy suburb of Portland, Oregon, where her father was a corporate tax attorney. She and her sister had had their own spot, even cars and their own boats for sailing on Lake Oswego. Disgusted by the sorority life at the University of Oregon, Joan had dropped out during her first term and enrolled at Reed College, where she had studied ceramics, weaving, and calligraphy. In 1963, she had moved to San Francisco and become the co-owner of ceramics shop. Although she had then had many friends among fashionable shopkeepers, folk singers, and dancers, she had remained aloof and introspective. It was through her sister Jane that Joan had first met Srila Prabhupada. Jane had gone with her boyfriend, Michael Grant, to live in New York City, where Michael had worked as a music arranger. In 1965, they had met Swamiji while he was living alone on the Babri, and they had become his initiated disciple, Mukunda and Janki. Swamiji had asked them to get married, and they had invited Joan to the wedding. As a wedding guest for the one day, Joan had then briefly entered Swamiji's transcendental world at 26 Second Avenue, and he had kept her busy all day making dough and filling kachori pastries for the wedding feast. Joan had worked in one room and Swamiji had worked in the kitchen. Although he had repeatedly come in and guided her in making the kachoris properly, telling her not to touch her clothes or body while cooking, and instructing her not to smoke cigarettes, because the food was to be offered to Lord Krishna and therefore had to be prepared purely. Joan had been convinced by this brief association that Swamiji was a great spiritual teacher, but she has returned to San Francisco without pursuing Krishna consciousness further. A few months later, Mukunda and Janki had driven to the West Coast with plans of getting soon to India, but had changed their plan when Mukunda had received a letter from Swamiji asking him to try to start a Krishna conscious temple in California. Mukunda had talked about Swamiji to Joan and other friends, and he had found that a lot of young people were interested. Joan had then accompanied Mukunda, Janki, and a boy named Roger Schlegel to the mountain in Oregon, where they had visited their mutual friend Sam and Marjorie, who had been living in a forest lookout tower. Mukunda had explained what he had known of Krishna consciousness, and the six of them had begun chanting Hare Krishna together. They had been especially interested in Swamiji's teaching about elevating consciousness without drugs. Mukunda had talked excitedly about Swamiji's having asked him to start a temple in California. And soon he and his wife Janki, Sam and his girlfriend Marjorie, and Roger and Joan, now intimate friends, had moved to an apartment in San Francisco to find a storefront and set the stage for Swamiji. After Swamiji's arrival, Joan had begun attending the temple kirtans. She felt drawn to Swamiji and the chanting, and she especially liked the informal visiting hours. Swamiji would sit in his rocking chair with his hand in his bead bag, chanting the holy names. And Joan would sit fascinated watching his finger moving within the bag. One day during Swamiji visiting hours, while Swamiji was sitting in his rocking chair and Joan and others were sitting at his feet, Janki's cat crept in through the hallway door and began slowly coming down the hallway. The cat came closer and closer and slowly mingled right in front of Swamiji's feet. It sat down, looking up intently at Swamiji and began to move. None of the devotees knew what to expect. Swamiji began gently stroking the back of the cat with his foot, saying, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. Are you feeding him prasadam, milk? Unquote. Joan. I was touched by Swamiji activities and his kindness, even to the cats, and I longed for more association with him. Joan came to understand that serving Swamiji was a serious matter, but she didn't want to jump into initiation until she was 100% sure about it. This is very nice. Sometimes she would cry in ecstasy, and sometimes she would fall asleep during Swamiji's lecture. So she remained hesitant and skeptical, wondering, quote, how can I actually apply Swamiji's teaching to my life, unquote. One evening, Swamiji asked her, when are you going to be initiated? Joan said that she didn't know, but that she relished reading his books and chanting Hare Krishna. She said that because she was attracted to the mountains and to elevated spiritual consciousness, she wanted to travel to Tibet. Swamiji, sitting in his rocking chair, looked down at Joan as she sat at his feet. She felt he was looking right through her. Quote, I can take you to a higher place than Tibet, unquote. He said, quote, just see, unquote. So Joan suddenly felt that Swamiji knew everything about her and she understood, quote, oh, I have to see through his eyes what Krishna consciousness is, unquote. He was promising that he would take her to some very elevated realm, but she would have to see it. It was then that Joan decided to become Swamiji's disciple. Very wonderful place to stop. We have reached our time and we should be punctual in our practice. Devotees may have to do other things. So we'll stop here. Before they leave, we would like to offer our humble obeisances at the desk of their feet by saying Vanchakalpatarubhasya Kripa Sindhubhaya Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Thank you very much for joining. Beautiful morning and relishing the holy name. This is the perfection of our life, constantly engaged in chanting the holy name. It is so nice to be engaged in chanting the holy name. More and more we chant, more and more fearless we can become. And by becoming fearless, we can remain happy. Despite so many difficulties we may have to face in the material world, but the holy name will keep us calm and cool. That's the advantage. So anybody has any question, comment, correction, or chastisement before we close our session?